The National Assembly halts implementation of education reforms recommended by the Presidential Working Party Group for failure to have them pass through Parliament.
Morocco's bid to bring the World Cup back to Africa gets major boost after nod to host the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations after Guinea was stripped due to concerns over infrastructure.
Meanwhile, Burkina Faso's military rulers claim they have thwarted another coup attempt and arrested the plotters barely a year after the junta came to power in similar fashion.
Yes, good morning. It is the 28th day of September 2023, 2 days to payday, and with Thursday being the new Friday, the excitement is already palpable even in the studio. I can see quite some excitement here. Good morning, welcome to Morning Cafe. My name is Freddy Ndimuli.
And I'm Flora Limuki. Welcome to this edition of Morning Cafe. We do have a great show lined up for you. Do stick by for that. And of course, keep interacting with us at TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. The hashtag is Morning Cafe.
And Flora, before you even forget, I'm usually Stanley Nyeringita, by the way. This particular morning, we have a very interesting conversation which I am really waiting for. And just to prepare, well, ourselves for this, I mean, Fred alishapita maneno. The whole matters dowry.
Unajuaje nilipita? Acha rumors.
The whole conversation of dowry. And actually, my proverb comes from there. He who asks for the meaning of a proverb is calling, or rather, terming the mother's dowry a waste. That's an African proverb.
It's very deep.
Yes.
Well, this morning we're asking the question, is payment of dowry still relevant today? Is payment of dowry still relevant today? You can interact with this and with the rest of the show on social media, TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. Let's now take a look at the top story. Now, the National Assembly has halted implementation of the education reforms as recommended by the Presidential Working Party until necessary laws are passed through Parliament. Emuhaya Member of Parliament Omboko Milemba had sought direction on the ongoing implementation of the education reforms, which touch on the Constitution and several statutes, without the changes being passed in Parliament. Among the changes recommended include the scrapping of the categorization of secondary schools and the removal of compulsory subjects for career choices. The report further gives approval to the competence-based curriculum and recommends its continuation. It, however, calls for a review of learning areas and content to reduce overload and overlaps. Yes, and after that, we now get the day's diary. Then we'll come back and take a look at the dailies.
Right, and then today's diary, quite a lot actually happening today. And today is actually World Rabies Day. So in case you're having a dog there, make sure it has had the vaccination. Today is also International Safe Abortion Day, basically marking the whole action in support of the right to safe abortion. And this year's theme is movement building, solidarity and justice for the right to safe abortion. But now in matters politics today, in the ongoing bipartisan talks in the Bomas of Kenya, former IEBC commissioners are expected to present their views in the 5 thematic areas of the talks, co-chaired by Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka and the National Assembly Majority Leader, that is Kimani Ichung'wah, that is in matters, politics, basically. And well away from that, into matters El Nino preparedness, Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua will today host cabinet secretaries, governors and disaster management partners and also humanitarian agencies in Karen today to discuss the country's preparedness on El Nino rains. And today is also the Nairobi International Book Fair. Well, it began yesterday, but today is now the official opening ceremony, and we do expect Education Cabinet Secretary, that is Ezekiel Machogu, and Cabinet Secretary Defense Aden Duale to be the chief guests. This particular book fair runs from, yesterday, the 27th of September, all the way to the 1st of October. So definitely rush to Sarit Center and, get to see what is happening on there. But we definitely have to always tell you what happened on a day like today in our Today in History. And 2 interesting events that happened on a day like today. First of all, you definitely know penicillin. So you're probably wondering, when was penicillin ever discovered? It was discovered on the 28th of September, back in 1928, by a Scottish medical researcher, Alexander Fleming. This is the first effective antibiotic. You can definitely research on that and get to see, after a whole vacation, he actually discovered that. And back in Africa, in Guinea, back in 2009, at least 157 people were murdered by security forces and 109 women raped in a Guinea stadium. Back in during the 2009 massacre. That is on our day's diary this morning and also Today in History. But stick around for around 9 a.m. there when we give you more county diary updates and also some international. But right now we can now dig into the dailies and see what is happening. And in most of these dailies, actually, Fred and Flora, the whole AFCON and hosting AFCON 2027 is the big deal this particular morning.
Yes, let's start off with the Standard this morning. Real hard work to AFCON 2027 begins. That's a big headline on the Standard. This Thursday, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania's joint bid to host the Africa Cup of Nations in 2027 was yesterday accepted. The heavy lifting starts with refurbishment of stadiums, serious investment in training grounds and talent injections in national teams. The story is extensively covered on pages 4 and 5. And a quote there by the CS Ababu Namwamba: "As East Africans, we are one, a single passport. We speak one language, that's Kiswahili. We have a common agenda, and hosting this tournament is such a big shot in the arm for integration." That's definitely the big, a very colorful front page of the Standard with the flags of the 3 African countries that will jointly host the AFCON 2027. The other big story highlighted on the front page: Deputy President struggles to fit in Ruto's former shoes. 1 year later, the Deputy President's scorecard sees him earning points from milk and tea farmers, but flopping on coffee and illicit alcohol wars in central Kenya. The story is on page 8 of this newspaper. On the top strip of the Standard this morning, blow to Ruto as MPs question education report. It is part of our highlights and our top story today. The story is on page 7. Elsewhere in business, fresh pain as cement prices go up. That's in the business pages of the Standard. Everything is going up. And elsewhere, click ban Dicey Nature to bar photos. Interesting conversation on data protection and how clubs and even schools use some of the photos that they take without consent. That story is on page 6, and those are the highlights on the front page of the Standard today. We turn over to the back page and a quick look, of course, to do with sports. What winning 2027 AFCON bid means for East Africa region. The tournament will have a huge impact on the region. And we have a quote there by Nicholas Musonye, former SECAFA Secretary General. Economically, our image and tourism will grow, the visitors will spend, and the economy will improve. It will have a long-term impact. And yes, some revelation there. The number of stadiums that CAF requires AFCON hosts to have in readiness for the tournament is 6. So if Kenya can provide 2, and Tanzania 2, then Uganda can give us 2 of their playing grounds, and then I think we're good to go. And
up to standard stadiums for that case. You know, I was looking at page 2 of the Standard. There's a load of conditions for that the Confederation of African Football needs to approve a stadium. So the East African people who are in charge of having those stadiums ready by 2027 do have a lot of work to do. More than 10 or 20, close to 15 conditions there for the stadiums to be approved to actually host the AFCON 2027. And on the Daily Nation this morning, still matters football, it's coming home. Football extravaganza, Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania's joint bid to host the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations was yesterday given the green light by the Confederation of African Football, signaling the continental body's confidence in the 3 countries' capability to hold the tournament, the first in the region since 1976 in Ethiopia. But if the hard work doesn't start now, we may lose our chance again. That story is extensively covered on page 2, 3, 46 and 47 of the Daily Nation this morning. And there the CAF President, Patrice Motsepe, pictured there as he announced the host countries for the 2027 Africa Cup of Nations yesterday in Cairo. The 2027 tournament will be jointly hosted by Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania, while Morocco will host the 2025 edition. And in numbers, 24 is the number of teams that will take part in the tournament to be held in 3 EAC countries. And of course, pictured there, President William Ruto, the sports CS, Babu Namwamba, and FKF President Nick Mwendwa during the unveiling of the East African Community Pamoja bid for the Africa Cup of Nations 2027, sometimes in May. And on the top strip of the Daily Nation this morning, Mudhama Ndemo and 1 billion shillings fraud in Konza. And that story is on page 7 of the Daily Nation as President Ruto's administration plans to pick up the pace on the Konza Technopolis project. A recent court decision has revealed that Kenya's flagship tech hub is built on a foundation of fraud that was planned and aided by senior government officials. That story is extensively covered on page 7. And on the right strip of the Daily Nation this morning, tea farmers set for bonus next month. The final bonus payment to over 750,000 tea farmers is expected to be disbursed next month. The announcement was made by DP Gachagua, who revealed that KTDA factories earned 95.3 billion shillings in the year 2023. And still featuring on the Daily Nation, teenager in Maigo murder case to be held for 21 days. The 16-year-old, who is the main suspect in the murder of Nairobi Hospital Finance Director Eric Maigo, will be held for 21 days after police obtained custodial orders to detain her pending the conclusions of investigations. And some good news for the sugar millers there. The government has written off 117 billion shillings owed to it by state-owned sugar companies in preparation to lease out the mills to private players. The president announced that yesterday. And that's pretty much what we have on the Daily Nation top page this morning.
Right, and now focusing on matters business. Well, also Business Daily has reflected the Africa Cup of Nations 2027 matters hosting, and it calls it East Africa's moment. But away from that, other headlines making it to the Business Daily. The big story for BD is cash outside banks hits an all-time high of 273.4 billion Kenyan shillings. So about New July, peak attributed to rushed state spending and disbursements offer cash flow relief to contractors. Below there, on Business Daily, procurement watchdog flags fresh Kenya Power meters tender and gives you a whole, basically, the numbers there. The electricity distributor made a 1.14 billion loss in the 6 months to December last year. On the right side, NHIF staff get 1 year grace period to reapply for jobs, and Kengen to pay 2 billion shillings as debt battle continues. Bank earns margins of up to 10% in forex transactions. That is on page 14 of the markets. On page 9, what to get on page 9? More, the whole intelligence bit, a quote there by Bitangendemo. Many of today's big tech companies began as responsible entities but lost their ethical compass as they expand. And on page 19, pull out there on the Life magazine, young Kenyans turn art galleries into chill spots. Is all on matters Business Daily. On the back page, matters role of tax incentives in securing financial freedom in retirement. That is on BD. Focus on Taifa Leo.
Okay, kwenye gazeti la Taifa Leo Alhamisi ya leo, habari kuu hatimaye zamu ya Kenya kujinata baada ya kutajwa mwandalizi wa fainali ya AFCON 2027. Hiyo ndio habari kuu pale. Ilikuwa shangwe, vifijo na nderemo kote nchini baada ya Kenya kutunukiwa hadhi ya kuandaa fainali za kombe la Afrika AFCON mnamo mwaka 2027. Kenya itaandaa fainali hizo kwa pamoja na majirani zake Uganda na Tanzania. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili wa gazeti la Taifa Leo hii leo. Vidokezo vingine kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, kibarua cha Ruto kuhusu referenda. Rais akabiliwa na kibarua kuamua ikiwa aunge maandalizi ya kura ya uamuzi au la. Habari yenyewe kwenye ukurasa wa 3. Kwingineko, Weta apiga breki mageuzi ya elimu. Spika asema ni bunge tu lenye mamlaka ya kuunda na kurekebisha sheria. Amtaka waziri awasilishe ripoti hiyo bungeni. Ukurasa wa 2. Kwingineko, wanasiasa wakemewa kufadhili ujangili. Kamishna wa kaunti ya Turkana alilaumu wanasiasa kwa kufadhili wezi wa mifugo. Pale juu kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, wakulima wa chai kuvuna bonasi nono. Wakuzaji majani chai watarajiwa kupokea maelfu ya pesa mwezi ujao kama bonus. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa 4. Kiwewe ni mkulima wa chai, tuongee kando. Kwingineko, watu 100 wafa motoni katika harusi. Moto ulitokea katika harusi Iraq baada ya fataki kufyatuliwa. Hizo ndizo habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo hii leo.
Naam, na tuvuke sasa Uganda. On the Daily Monitor this morning, AFCON coming home, what it took for the win, for the bid, what the award means to Uganda, where Ugandans can make the AFCON cash, and what Uganda needs to be ready. That is what's headlining on the Daily Monitor. The East African nations, Cup of Nations, beat Egypt, Senegal, Botswana and Algeria. This means that Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania has automatically qualified for the 2027 edition as the host of the AFCON, if all the factors are kept constant. And still headlining on the Daily Monitor this morning, Congolese musician Fally Ipupa faces arrest in Uganda. And also we do have government plans to upgrade 3 airports in Uganda. That is what's headlining on the Daily Monitor in Uganda this morning.
Right, I was taking a look at the Star this morning. The Star going with matters Kenya's big win for the 2027 AFCON. Let me just have that even for our viewers. Kenya wins big with the 2027 AFCON and goes with the AFCON rights, and also has the same photo that was on the Daily Nation, that particular unveiling of the East African Community Pamoja bid. Both President William Ruto, FKF president, and also CS Sports. And on the top strip there, they say matters coming home. Biggest continental football bonanza returns to East Africa after 51 years. And also goes on to say it will be the 36th edition and will be hosted by 3 countries for the first time, on page 4 and also on page 5. Other highlights making it to the Star this morning. On the bottom strip there, prepare for higher sugar prices as shortage hits Comesa market. So Fred, on one side, the tea farmers are happy, but then now for the sugar farmers, so ni kama utakunywa tu nduvia.
He likes he's hot and strong, eh? So you're good.
That can be better.
Oh yes, and that is in matters, the bottom strip of the Star. And in matters power tussle, MPs say no to Ruto's education reforms, halt implementation. More on page 6. On the top strip of the Star, the whole social health bill that was a heated debate yesterday in the National Assembly, deep into the night, MPs banning the midnight oil. So the Star says more pain for workers as state mulls fresh slew of taxes. More of that on page 2. That is on the Star this morning.
Okay, twende Tanzania. Katika gazeti la Mwananchi hapo, AFCON in more than 7 papers this morning. Safari ya Afrika Mashariki kuandaa AFCON mwaka 2027. Rais wa CAF afichua sababu nyeti za Tanzania, Kenya na Uganda kupewa nafasi hiyo. Waziri Ndumbaro aeleza mchaka waliopitia Algeria alivyofungua njia Kariapagawa. And tukisalia bado katika gazeti la Mwananchi, mageuzi ya kiuchumi yanukia kwa balozi za Tanzania nje, na vilevile kuna taarifa hapo ya ushahidi wa mtoto ulivyomaliza babake aliyemua mkewe. Na bado katika gazeti la Mwananchi, miezi 6 kujifunga mkanda. Bosi mpya wa TANESCO asema kuna uhaba wa megawati 400 kazi ya kukarabati miundombinu kukamilika Machi mwaka 2024. Atangaza mwelekeo mpya wa mikakati akilitaja bwawa la Mwalimu Nyerere. That's what is headlining on the Mwananchi this morning in Tanzania.
Yes, we stay in Tanzania and we look at the sister paper there, The Citizen. And yes, it's coming home. A very similar headline there, same to the Daily Nation in Kenya. It's coming home. Tanzania yesterday won its bid to host Africa's biggest football extravaganza in 2027, along with neighboring Kenya and Uganda, making the first time the competition will be played in this part of Africa since 1976. That's a big story on the front page of The Citizen as well. Of course, it is rare. I think it's only on budget day that we get to have similar headlines across the 3 nations of East Africa. But this time around, the 3 nations have something in common to celebrate. The other headline on the front page of The Citizen, hiring of state entity heads under scrutiny. Recent blunders in the process of appointing heads of state-owned enterprises have put the current system firmly under the spotlight, with some observers calling for hiring to be overseen by an independent body. On issues of electricity, still on the front page of The Citizen in Tanzania, and I've had the same on the Mwananchi. TANESCO chief, my priorities in next 6 months. That story is on page 3. And that is the front page of The Citizen this Thursday. Let's come back home and take a look at Karakacha leo.
Oh, yes. And, well, the star is really veering off from what you'd expect around, but on page 17, Flora, your home governor, your county home governor, is there.
There's no rest for being a Marian banner.
Caricature looking like Meru Governor Kawira Mwangaza holding a guitar there. And a number of MCAs really want to push her out of the exit door, speaking largely on matters devolution and the teething problems. Well, it's 10 years. Is it 10 of 10 years
10,
now?
10 years.
10. Teething problems should no longer be there for devolution, but really it is happening in Meru.
Yes. Interesting cartoon there on the Daily Nation.
I'm wondering if the guitar is a representation of this first gentleman of Meru, or it's just happened to be there.
It would appear that's the only source of strength for the governor right now.
Yes.
Very.
Yeah. It is sad to see that she might be coming back to the Senate for the second impeachment motion. So I don't know what happens to her after that. It's just a matter of wait and see. But Meru,
Kuna shida pale.
kuna shida.
Okay, the cartoon on the Standard today, it has a conversation, a comic conversation there, comic strip. The conversation starts with a woman talking to a gentleman there, saying, with artificial intelligence, AI, should we be worried about autonomous weapons that could wipe out populations of their own? Then he answers, that will be impeding human progress. Oh no, she opines that, shouldn't we put a pause on AI, introduce a moratorium until we figure things out? And the gentleman answers, that will be impeding human progress. Better still, we can create AI war crime court that could try those responsible. And it just concerns around artificial intelligence and whether or not they came in too soon without proper safeguards. But the thing with technology is that you never plan fully. Once technology is here with us, we cannot reverse it and we cannot say we won't use it until you have the laws. Once it's here with us, tuna flow. Kaflo. Kaende.
In Meru, it's kabati.
So that's a cartoon on the Standard today.
Once again, Stano.
Stano is missing. The People Daily, you do realize we were not able to look at the People Daily this morning. So apologies for that. The publication is currently unavailable. So we are not able to see Stano's work today on page 10 of the People Daily. But then I'll go with the cartoon on the Daily Nation today. Because what is happening in Meru with the governor and MCA seeking to impeach her is happening in several other counties. Where they're wrangling either between the governor and his deputy or the governor and the county assembly. Seen a lot of issues there.
Yeah.
And even yesterday, I think one of the dailies quoting that now the number of the governors are blaming the deputies for sidelining with the MCAs, for coming up with even some policies to have them exit.
Yeah, they're colluding with the MCAs to impeach them.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I think for me it's the cartoon on the Daily Nation as well, and I pray that the prayers of Bishop Kawira Mwangaza brings light to Meru County, literally.
Interesting. A reminder of our question today, is payment of dowry still relevant today? Is payment of dowry still relevant today? What do you think? It is a conversation that elicits quite some reaction. You just want to see what you think about it. Is dowry payment still relevant today? You can answer us on our social media pages, TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook. Today in our conversation, we'll be focusing on the boundaries review, the pending review or delimitation of boundaries for constituencies and wards, and eventually the counties. For our panel today, we have Philip Kisia, former town clerk Nairobi. He's a governance expert, and Honorable Dr. John Mutunga, MP Tigania West. Do stand by for that conversation after this break. You're watching Morning Cafe. boundaries review. But before we get to that, we'll discuss other issues. This morning, as I had promised you, we're privileged to have in studio Philip Kisia, former Nairobi town clerk and governance expert. Karibu sana and good morning. It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you, Fred, for having me this morning.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a punishment driving to Kiambu.
Well, we're glad you made it.
It's too early for some of us, but anyway, it's okay, I'm here.
We are very happy that you made time to be here. We are also hoping that Honorable Dr. John Mutunga, MP Tigania West, will be joining this panel shortly. But even as we wait for the Honorable member to join us, Bwana Kisia, are you a football fan? I'm sure there's something you can say about Kenya's bid to host the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in 2027.
First of all, of course, I do follow football. Not that I'm a addict fan, but I must congratulate the governments. Mm-hmm. The governments.
Yes, it is a joint
of
bid.
Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. And our bid was made stronger by the fact that Tanzania had hosted the youth, tournament. So well done to the three countries. You've done us proud, and we hope that this time round we shall get it right. Mm-hmm. In the past we've been given an opportunity, but we failed miserably.
We never got there.
Yeah. So this time round, please, Ababu, my friend, my village boy, just make sure it happens.
We have 4 years to prepare. Do you think it's adequate time for us?
You see, holding such a tournament, is not a child's play. Mm-hmm. You're talking about having proper infrastructure in place, mode of transport, and you'll have thousands and thousands of people flocking into Nairobi and our sister states. So, it's not a child's play. There's a lot to be done, particularly in terms of, the infrastructure, the stadiums that are supposed to be there by then. So 4 years is not a long time. But 4 years, I can tell you, Fred, 4 years is a very, very short time.
But at least with the distribution of resources now in infrastructure, if at all the required stadiums are totaling 6, we definitely can afford 2 decent ones. As a former town clerk of Nairobi, you can at least vouch for 2.
Sometimes we've had challenges even producing one because the resources that are allocated to roll out these programs end up in people's pockets. Mm-hmm. Remember not too long ago, the media reported that I think of a billion or something had gone into people's pockets. Today, there's no stadium. Today, there's nobody in jail. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Fred, is ridiculous. In other civilized countries, somebody will be 6 feet under. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow.
You loot public funds, 1 billion shillings. Mm-hmm. You're just there smiling at us, and nothing has happened. Come on, let us be serious, man.
Well, the risk still remains. Because Morocco won the bid to host the 2025 AFCON, which is 2 years before Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda get a chance to host the tournament. And they won simply because Guinea, which had won the bid earlier, was stripped off the rights because of failing to ensure the infrastructure is in place. So if we fail to do that, 4 years, we could also lose the bid. Do you see that happening this time around?
Fred, as I said, is my prayer that it doesn't happen again because it will be extremely embarrassing, not only to Kenya, but to East Africa. Mm-hmm. So, let's just make sure this thing happens. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it happens smart. Mm-hmm. And please, for once, please, those people have been given responsibility, particularly when it comes to public funds, make sure that those funds go into the project. Mm-hmm. Not into your pockets. For once, please.
Okay.
Just for once.
For once.
For once.
It will be even more embarrassing, as Philip Kisia says, if even with a joint bid, the entire East African...
Or the other two sister countries, pass the mark and we fail. you see, the bid will still be cancelled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the three have to work in tandem and to make sure that this thing happens, and it must happen smart.
Okay. And as promised, Honorable Dr. John Mutunga, MP Tigania West, has managed to find his way to studio. Good morning, karibu sana to the panel this morning.
Thank you very much.
And you found us just talking about the big headline. The excitement is palpable across East Africa. The fact that for the first time we're getting to host, after a very long time, a major tournament, a tournament of this caliber, getting the opportunity. We've gotten the opportunity previously, but we did not get there. This time round, we're doing it jointly with Tanzania and Uganda. I don't know if you are a football fan, but definitely the excitement, you must share it as well.
I watch football. I don't play football. I think in my life I played basketball and volleyball and others. But I think it's a great opportunity for Kenya for East Africa, let's say, to host the African Cup of Nations. And this will be a test of time. First of all, to try out our teams in home ground, and also to have the challenge, to face the challenge of having many visitors around and taking care of them and ensuring that there is efficiency and effectiveness in the play. I think it's a good idea for us.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Because our main discussion is still around the boundaries review, but it wouldn't be fair if I didn't get some of your comments on some of the top headlines today. And one of the interesting ones is this criticism on the Deputy President. On the front page of the Standard, it says the Deputy President is struggling to fit into Ruto's former shoes. 1 year later, the Deputy President's scorecard sees him earning points from milk and tea farmers, but flopping on coffee and illicit alcohol. This is a promise he made himself, that he will deal with the cartels, especially in the coffee sector. He has held a number of fora to discuss and converse with the leaders of Mount Kenya region on how to tackle the issue of illicit alcohol. You are a leader from that region, Dr. Mutunga. Why is this such a big problem? Why is the Deputy President unable to do this?
I can't say the Deputy President is unable to do it. I'll say that he's dealing with a very complicated problem. I've been in one or two conventions to discuss the illicit alcohol, the illicit brew, and the Deputy President has been extremely clear, especially to the administration, in terms of their fighting, deliberately fighting the illicit brew consumption, starting with the brewers, then all the way to the buyers or the consumers. Mm-hmm. The problem we have is that, let me say it's an integrated problem. It starts with the people who brew the alcohol, and then they are connected with the police and the administration, the chiefs, the assistant chiefs, and so on. So, in Kenya, there's a word we use called cartels. We say they are cartels. So he's dealing with cartels in the illicit brew area, and they're also dealing with cartels in coffee. But coming back to illicit brew, you realize that the problem is a little bit more complex than we see it. Mm-hmm. First of all, we must make sure the consumer stops consuming. And some people are addicted. They have been used to it for a very long time. Then we must make sure that corruption does not reign. And that has been the major detriment in getting people, making progress in this area. The reason being that you see there is complacency in the police action. There is also lack of trust between this administration, where we have the area managers, the assistant chiefs and others. And then there is a police, the investigation arm of the police, CID, and the police themselves. So when you arrest people before this Deputy President's intervention, boldly, you will take them with evidence to a police station. And then a police vehicle is used to return that evidence back to the brewer. So you don't understand.
Bwana, what I'm hearing from Honorable Mutunga is that the Deputy President probably did not take time to appreciate just how big the problem was before he made that promise that he would tackle the issue of the issues of coffee sector and illicit alcohol. Don't you agree?
Welcome, Mheshimiwa Daktari. I'm going to be very measured because Daktari is my in-law. and you know they have the right to recall. But I'm not surprised that Mheshimiwa Daktari Mutunga has said what he has said. I think these guys were just not ready for the task. They underestimated the job that was ahead of them. They thought it was child's play. Now you get into the office and you are facing real issues. Now when, and I'm sure my brother is, from Kenya Kwanza side of the political divide. I mean, these things he's calling cartels, why can't you crack them? A year in office, I mean, it's over a year now. Mm-hmm. We are going to completing the 13th month in office. And you still talk about cartels as if there are things that, I don't know, there are people who don't exist. Why can't you just crack them? You know, there are two things here when you hear people talk about cartels. Either they have got into office and they have discovered that there's a gravy train and they have joined, or they just have no capacity to do the job. Mm-hmm. There's no other way. Because he's talking about, Mheshimiwa is talking about, I don't know, the chiefs and, the police. But these are units squarely under the executive. Mm-hmm. They're under the executive. Who appoints the director, it's called the IG, police. Is it not the executive? Mm-hmm. Who does it report to? Is it not the executive? It is even worse when they say, Mheshimiwa tells us that even the chiefs cannot perform their jobs. Mm-hmm. And they fall under the administration. There's no, I can tell you, Fred, without fear of contradiction, they have either gotten in, yeah, and he says that, it's, that industry is, it's worth billions of shillings.
It is very
those who get into political office, most of the time, I can tell you without fear that 90% of the time they get there to enrich themselves. Mm-hmm. They don't get there to serve anybody. So if you see things not happening, you're talking about cartels as if it is impossible. It's like trying to get to God. Mm-hmm. That is impossible because we don't even know where he lives. But this thing called cartels, why can't you just finish them, crack them?
Okay.
We saw at least Uhuru Kenyatta make an attempt because he went for them. He was intentional about what he wanted to do. And I think to a large extent, he succeeded. It's only that probably the strategies that he came up with were not sustainable. Mm-hmm. Because if you come up with measures that are sustainable, then two things happen. That those who come after you pick up from where you had left and move, yeah? Or those who pick up become complacent because they become part of those so-called But I think the big question is, why do people even take this illicit alcohol? Why?
Okay.
They have nothing to do. If people were gainfully employed, that they have a job, they can wake up in the morning and go and do this job. Do you think somebody will go to a Busa den or somewhere?
Yeah.
No.
It is even more concerning the fact that some of these problems are inherent, especially in the Mount Kenya region, where the deputy president comes from. And he has ensured that there's that whole competition about who's the Mount Kenya kingpin. If at all the deputy president fails to address issues around coffee, issues around illicit alcohol, does he stand an opportunity or a chance to actually claim that space in that region?
I was answering the question, why is it difficult? Why is it appearing difficult? I did not in the least say that he has failed. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised that my in-law here recognizes the effort of Uhuru Kenyatta in fighting alcoholism. I think that's a fallacy. During Uhuru's time, alcoholism was entrenched in this country. It was free for all. There was no deliberate attempt. I told you, I'll give you an example of brewers are arrested, their equipment is taken to a police station, and a police vehicle drives them back to the brewer. What level of management is that? I mean, what level of control is that? At least now, we can't see that happening. At least now, the level of alcoholism and the reduction in brewing of alcohol has gone down significantly in the region. Of course, you can attribute their consumption to many factors. But let me say something. We never saw, in fact, I never heard the previous administration talking about controlling consumption of illicit brew. As a person, I suffered in my own constituency. People couldn't even brand. I had about 35 brewing units. You could go and get them arrested, and then they are released the following day, and then the same person who was rebrands comes back in a different version. When the intervention of the current government came in, all the administration was called. We were there to witness. And they were given firm instructions. Decide. A chief or an assistant chief will not coexist with alcohol in the same locality. Either alcohol prevails or you can go home. Or your administration prevails. So that is the standing position as at now. Okay. Let me say that alcohol consumption in the region has gone down significantly, and we're moving towards the end. Let me come to the coffee.
Yes.
And the issue of cartels. The reason why I was linking the alcoholism to cartels is the arrangement between the police, the investigative power organs, and the administration, because there was that collusion. We could just call it collusion. Now, when it comes to coffee, coffee is a crop that we do not actually consume. A lot of it we sell out there. We made a deliberate decision, policy decision, to give foreigners the opportunity to market our product free, without active participation in the marketing. We allowed them to take our product, through auction of course, and go with it. The moment it leaves the boundaries of Kenya, it's never called Kenya coffee. No, it just goes there and is branded. Our coffee is top quality in the world. It's used to improve on the quality of the others. It's used it's added to other coffee basically to improve. It can be sold directly as specialty coffee across the globe. What have we done and what have we not done? What we have done is actually mismanage that particular aspect. And that is what the current administration is trying to correct. What we have not done is market our coffee globally as specialty coffee. Identify the countries with major outlets, like America, with more than 30,000 outlets of coffee houses, and market our coffee as Kenyan coffee for direct brewing and consumption. Direct crushing, roasting, crushing, brewing and consumption. We haven't done that.
Okay.
So we trust people. When you trust somebody, and there are a few people, they sit down, take the same coffee and make a decision for you.
Okay. It is criticism.
If you dive deep into what happens around coffee, you realize that the processor, there's a level of processing which is dehusking, removing the parchment to get green coffee. The processor is the same as the buyer and the same as the seller.
Okay. It still doesn't explain why farmers are making less now than they were making.
Fred,
we're due for a break, so probably 30 seconds.
Just 30 seconds. You see, Fred, Mheshimiwa should tell us the price of coffee, because my wife is a coffee farmer, and so I can feel the pain. Mheshimiwa should be telling us, let's not listen to these short stories. They are good. The price of coffee a year ago was X. Why is it Y?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, why is it Y? Time for us to take a break. When we come back, we delve into the real topic of the day, and that is boundaries review. You're watching Morning Cafe. Do stand by for that.
there is the office. I'm sure some of the groundworking is going on. What is important is the committee to make the commission to make the decisions. That's what I believe.
Okay.
Or rather, I assume there is an office in place.
The CEO of that secretariat appeared before the National Dialogue Committee last week to make proposals, and he said that for any reasonable boundaries review process, it would require not less than 18 months after the appointment of the chairperson of the commission, meaning that we still have to wait until the commission is in place, and then after that now look at 18 months. That will definitely be in violation of this provision that after every 12 years the boundaries have to be reviewed, because we had a census in 2019.
Yeah. You see, you're right. I mean, the issue you're talking about is covered under Article 89, A, B, and C. And of course, other provisions, as Mheshimiwa has rightly put. But as to whether there's a crisis or not, I think, in my view, there's a serious and looming crisis. Because we know we have bad culture, we have bad mentality, we are poor in management, okay? And as we've said, the CEO himself said, from the time the chair and the commission is put in motion, they require about 18 months. And that is if they're efficient, okay? If there are no headwinds, ahead of their processes. So, there's no commission. By the time this talks at Boma's end, I think it's another, how many months, Mheshimiwa? 1 month?
I think 1.5.
1.5 months.
Because, yeah.
So that takes us to end of the year, okay? Then if they agree, the other processes to be followed, constitutional processes to be followed. And then once we have done it neatly, then we set in motion the process of recruiting the chairman and other commissioners. And you know, it is not a walk in the park, Mheshimiwa, and he knows it. There'll be a push and pull, because that's the engine. That's the engine of everything. If you don't slip your fellow through, or guys who are aligned to you, you are unlikely to manage the electoral process. Because they say, oh, it is independent, but these guys are never independent. There's a guy pulling shots from somewhere, either from the market or from the big house, but there's somebody pulling shots. So there'll be, you can imagine a push and pull to make sure that even the commission has the face of Kenya, it has credible people, it has guys who can actually do the job. I mean, you just look at the other commission, it was a total failure, right from the top, and I've said it before, and I'm on record. You know, you wonder that, is this the best that we could get? Are there not other capable Kenyans who could have been given a chance to do the job? You believe in mediocrity? Why can't we, for once, at least embrace meritocracy, for once? So I can tell you, Fred, that if Honorable Mutunga and others think that there's no looming crisis, there's a crisis because of time. And you see, time in the Muli, time is one of the biggest resource that any serious manager has, the most important resource. So once it is consumed, you cannot regain it. You can't say, okay, you can't store it somewhere and say, okay, the time I've lost, you can never regain time. It is the highest perishable resource that a human being has. So time is running out, and we're still, in talks. I'm hoping that these talks will bear some fruit. I'm hoping that even as they're talking, that, it is just a curtain, that things have been agreed, and the things that have been agreed are for the benefit of this country.
Yes, and talking of time, there's an issue that emerges, especially with some constituencies which did not meet the population quota during the previous review. And there were about 27 or so of them, which automatically, given the kind of formula that they adopted to do the review, these constituencies would automatically have been dissolved. 27 of them. But they were protected for purposes of that review alone. Meaning, by the time the second review is due, these constituencies ideally should not be in existence because they are no longer protected by that time. That would in itself mean that we do not have the 290 constituencies as provided for in the law, meaning that probably even going into the next election would be an issue, a legal issue. Don't you see a crisis there, Honorable Mutunga?
Political problems have political solutions. And the reason why those constituencies were upheld, irrespective of having felons fallen qualification, is because of various other reasons. The issue of distance already has been significant in the discussions about boundaries of electoral units, because some areas are extremely expansive and very thinly populated. It's also not very fair to to say that somebody should have, the share of resources is uniform. Let me take a specific example like CNDF. CNDF does not recognize anything other than an electoral unit. Mm-hmm. It will not look at, it's not graduated to fit into the expansiveness of a county, of a constituency, or even the population. It's basically electoral unit, that's it. Although recently there has been an introduction of some level of recognition of the populations. Mm-hmm. Because the more wants you have, the more you can get in CNDF.
Isn't that the conversation going on right now, that some constituencies, when it comes to bursary, they're getting as low as 500 shillings, just simply because of the population?
Because of the population, yes. Remember, one of the electoral pledges, or rather the demands by the people, is 1 vote, 1 shilling, 1 man. Mm-hmm. We recognize the people. It is the people we develop. It's not the regions that we develop. Even in developed countries, you will not find infrastructure in ASAL areas. I mean, in a very, they will look for appropriate user for such areas, and then they will develop specific infrastructure for such, or amenities. So we look at populations. So in view of that, then when it comes to delineation of boundaries, I believe it will still be an issue, but I don't think it is going to be a crisis. The reason being that there must be ways and means of managing that particular issue. As a country, we would like to remain a unit that does not disintegrate in the face of small, problems like this. So when the time comes for boundary reviews, what I think would be the minimum would be to reduce the constituencies from 290 to less than that. That
would require a referendum, Bwana Kisia. Reducing the number of constituencies is one of those things.
That's the bare minimum that we would go for. But we wouldn't reduce, maybe we would.
Do you think it's something that this government is...
I think for the first time, I've met a member of parliament who is honest, at least on this particular matter, and he has the guts to speak his mind. I fully agree with Mheshimiwa that we need to bite the bullet. We have too many constituencies, some which even should not have been there. And that, of course, happened because of gerrymandering. That those in power just made sure that certain constituencies were put there to serve their political interests. So if we are to be serious this time round, let us have an IBC that has competent people, qualified, who have the guts, who can do the job, who can face the executive, and whoever comes on the way and say, this is the right thing to do, and this is what we're going to do. So I agree with him in full that we need to reduce the number from 290 to whatever it is, but following the law, because the law is very clear. Look at the size of the area. Look at the population, and I think it should be more population-driven, because you are not serving space. You are serving human beings, and that is why I think there's a group which was pushing this agenda: 1 man, one vote, 1 shilling, because the money is going to people. It is not going to the soil.
Do you see a situation where this particular issue of boundaries review could be the leading cause for us to have a referendum before the next election?
That is a matter that will affect, the Kenyans. And the Constitution is very clear that if there's an issue that will affect Kenyans in a certain way, then we have to go for a referendum. I don't see us escaping a referendum.
Before
so those who are running away from BBI 1, they should be ready for BBI 2.
Do you think there's a political risk, especially for President William Ruto, in having a referendum within his first term in office? For whatever reason, including this boundaries review?
I actually do not think there is a risk. We would see a risk where the need for referendum is misinterpreted, or rather the wrong idea is promoted. But arising from the discussions that are ongoing right now, and coming up with key issues that need to be responded to by the people, the framing of the question. You see, the problem we have is that we might have so many issues that need to be sorted out in a single referendum. And they need to be properly, structured to ensure that we can ask the yes/no question and get out of it. So right now, there are several things that require, if you change if there's any structural change, it calls for referendum. And review of the boundaries, reduction in the number of constituencies, or increase in the number of constituencies immediately changes the structure. The basic structure changes. So I wouldn't see it as a risk, depending on what is it that we are taking to the referendum.
I asked that question because of history, and we saw what the referendum of the year 2005 did to the first term of Kibaki's administration. Don't you think that this administration faces a similar situation?
I don't think so. These are my own views. Because the issues we are dealing with here are issues that touch on our people. They're not necessarily political issues. Although, of course, there are political implications, but they're not derived out of polity. When it comes to, you see, let me bring in the aspect of polity is also about development. We delineate these areas so that they can become development units. And then there is a member of parliament to go and represent their people, to be able to fetch for development, interpret development in the context of their circumstances, and lay this one clear to those who are dividing the national cake. Now, when you look at how we want to structure our country in terms of the number of constituencies, in terms of representation, and Kenyans are able to agree, because the discussions are between the Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, which means it's between the opposition and the government. If the opposition and government agree, these are the key issues we need to sort out, like making sure that we have real representative areas in parliament, and also resolving other arising issues out of what has really caused the discussions to go on. And Kenyans understand we want to solve our problem, not create any opportunities for anyone. I don't think it will be a risk to anyone.
So according to Dr. Mutunga, if at all we approach the referendum with a convergence of thoughts between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, then it will be easier. But is it possible for that to happen, that they agree on everything?
It is not possible that people agree on everything, even from household level. There are things we agree, but I think what is important is for the two sides. And I'm happy that that Mheshimiwa from the Kenya Kwanza side has at least admitted publicly that this is a matter that must be settled squarely between the two parties, between opposition and those who are governing this country. So that's a good spirit. At least they are becoming, the metros that hiding the gloves have been removed so we can have a proper conversation. But I can tell you, Fred, this thing will be emotional. And if, the voters, I mean, they're normally not very reasonable on some matters. And why am I saying it will be emotional? It will be emotional because they'll stop thinking. So anything that will be seen to punish this administration, that is what the voters will go for when voting during the referendum. So the voter, I suspect, not because of anything, not because maybe they don't like Dr. Mutunga, but because of the current living conditions. They are so harsh. People are feeling pain. So people are hungry and angry. And they will get into that space, not because of voting for the right thing, but voting for anything that will punish those who are currently providing leadership for this country. So as we approach the referendum, I don't see us escaping the referendum because Mheshimiwa is right, the structure is changing. And if the structure is changing, they cannot do what they normally do in Parliament. We know, we hear things happen in Parliament, like the way they pass the finance bill. Even if I was there and I was Kenya Kwanza, I would say on this one, I vote against it because it is going to hurt the people who have given me the job. But so thank God that it's a matter that is out of their control. It will come back to public space, it will come back to the Kenyans. And Kenyans, the beauty is, when it comes to common interests, like the cost of living, it does not know Kenya Kwanza, neither does it recognize Azimio. They are suffering. Okay. So, Mheshimiwa, be prepared for headwinds.
Okay.
You're going to be punished. Not because you're doing a poor job, but people are just suffering.
The debate on one man, one shilling, one vote was more rife in the Mount Kenya region. It was really heated, especially before that famous trip by the president for 5 days, where he stayed at the Sagana Lodge and he met all the leaders from that region. After that, that debate went mute. But leaders from that region are very vocal about this issue, meaning it is deep at the heart of what the people in Mount Kenya feel, that this determination of the boundaries dependent on the population quota is a discussion they want next. Why is Kenya Kwanza not ready to have that discussion about one man, one shilling, one vote?
There are no indications that Kenya Kwanza doesn't want to have that discussion. At least I'm not aware of any. The Kenya Kwanza is the government which has introduced the recognition of wards within a constituency and increased CDF respectively. There is also there are also other efforts that you can see are geared towards focus on their populations. When you look at the focus on constituency as a development unit, and that's what we're discussing today, and apportionment of resources as such, and even the contacts that the big office makes, it's constituency based. It does, even if a president visits a county, they are going to a constituency. And we are talking about the development in that particular constituency. So it is actually responding directly to people again. When you look at the other efforts, for instance, the universal health care, it's focusing on the person, the man, one person. If you look at the Hustler Fund, it's focusing on one person. So everything is focused on an individual. And that basically is a response to one man, one shilling, one vote. Look at the university education and the government scholarship program. The scholarship program is focused on individual. So most of the efforts of Kenya Kwanza are actually an interpretation of the manifesto, that we will try to get the people at the bottom of the pyramid to come up. And in the last 2 days, we've been discussing the two bills that we want to, or rather intend to make universal health care available to everyone. There are categories of people who will be paying almost nothing, but they will be they'll be able to access top medical care like any other Kenyan. We are dealing with an individual. So I don't see how the Kenya Kwanza government is not focused. That's actually how, that's the interpretation. Now that's the manifesto.
Yes.
And it's focused on an individual. Every effort is focused on an individual.
This discussion we're having could very easily end up with more constituencies. If a taller delimitation of boundaries is conducted, even as anticipated by the BBI, was going to see Mount Kenya have the lion's share of the constituencies. That would put other regions, well, it's a bit dicey when it comes to other regions which are a bit more sparsely populated. And it would put Mount Kenya at risk of going head-to-head against other regions as well. Politically, it is a dicey place to go into, but one that we cannot avoid. What kind of risk are we facing with that?
You see, why do people fear following what has been documented? In this case, the Constitution is our Bible. So, you know, all the principles that guide us are captured in the Constitution. So how we arrive at how many constituencies, be it in the former central Kenya or in western Nairobi, are clearly spelled out. The risk, the problem, is that you know, the political structure that we have does not make sure that there is fairness. Because once you have somebody getting into office from a particular region, you can be sure that that person will do whatever it takes to make sure that the resources are diverted. The ones which are supposed to go to this particular region are diverted and sent to a particular region. Okay? So I think I'm not worried because that's what it is, and that's what it should be. That the numbers, because they're serving people. So if Central Province, according to our own constitution, allows them to have another 10, and we reduce, from my brother's side, we reduce 5. There's nothing wrong. So I think once we get to a situation where people are getting services fairly, that there's fairness, there's equity, people will not be bothered.
Don't you
people
think
are bothered.
The reluctance.
No,
that,
people are bothered.
Yeah.
People are bothered because they know that once these fellows get into that space, that the other areas just keep on suffering. But what is wrong? Because Central is part of Kenya. The other area that was going to benefit was Western Kenya and Nairobi. And that is what should be done. I think the problem is not even the number of people are not worried. People are more concerned about the services. Are we getting the services? Is this government being fair to everybody?
Okay.
You just let's look at the basic, and these things are in the public domain. And I'm sure Mheshimiwa, you know, you may not have been a beneficiary, but just look at the number of people who were allocated slots during the KRA recruitment. 60% from 2 regions, and 40% are shared among other Kenyans. That's where the problem is. Look at the army. Even the army want to now bring politics. That you find there's so many slots, and almost more than half are going to 1 or 2 regions. That's where the danger is. But even if one region had, because they deserve them, because they've been active, and they're producing more people than you are. I mean, if you want to cure that problem, also produce. So,
Isn't that the conversation that we are not ready to have? The fact that some areas might get fewer constituencies than others.
I think the family sizes in Mount Kenya region are not as large as in some other parts of Kenya. That for sure I can.
So are you saying, Mheshimiwa, that the population figures are wrong?
I'm saying the population figures are right,
yeah.
But you see, it is from the beginning. There have always been many. Go to any situation. Go to a university, you find there are more. Go to the prisons, you find there are more. Go to the hospitals, you find there are more. So there are more. We have more people in Mount Kenya region than most of the other parts of in terms of, the size, in relation to the geographical area. So, and we say it from the beginning, and I like the fact that we agree that we are developing the people. We are not developing the mountains or the expansiveness of the area. We are developing the individual. And in every country, it is the individual who is supposed to be taken care of.
Yes.
That being the principle, the guiding principle, then there should be no cause for alarm.
Yes.
In
And
fact,
the
we should
numbers
just
don't
be
lie.
looking at how are our populations structured.
Yet it would appear that someone
Population numbers-
is least interested in having this conversation, because up until now, I'm made to understand that Volume 5 of the Kenya Bureau of Statistics report on the population census, which was to give the numbers of population per constituency, not per county, is yet to be made public. Definitely someone somewhere may be reluctant to have these numbers come out to the public. Why do you think that is?
When the population and housing census report for 2019 came out, many people disputed it. They said, okay, we are more than we probably have been estimated in the census, or rather reported in the census. But it gives an overview, a clear idea of how many people we have in whichever region. And that tells you we need to invest more in those regions, not because it is Mount Kenya, not because it has any relationship with anything, but because that's where most of the people are. And of course, look at other parameters. This is also where most of the GDP, contribution to the GDP for the Kenyan economy comes from. This is also where the consumption of the Kenyan, whatever we probably produce is a lot more consumed there. So in all parameters, they deserve to be recognized. So that being the case, then we would be wrong not to consider populations.
Yes.
And if we are going for boundary review, boundaries review, of which we probably will do, I don't know, now long, based on the circumstances, right?
The law provides for the timelines. We're supposed to do it now.
Then we should look at those areas. When we examine the BBI, it had several things that were good. But there are several other things which were not good. And the bad things or the issues that were off became too weighty for the greater majority of Kenyans. That's why it was refused, rejected. However, there is no one who will come to this country and say that, yeah, okay, Mount Kenya, you wait for others. Or we will not consider your populations in the determination. There is no president of this person. Without support from Mount Kenya, it will be extremely difficult.
Yes.
Because we have very many people, and they are committed people.
It is
committed in everything.
It is a very dicey discussion even for the president to have right now, because telling people from areas in the northern parts of Kenya, which are very sparsely populated, that probably they deserve fewer constituencies than those in Mount Kenya. That will have the effect of pitting one region against another, with claims that we have more people than you have more land, no people. It is that kind of conversation that politicians usually don't like having, especially at the level of the president. Do you think there's a way that we can avoid this conversation? The kind of emotions have forced the IEBC CEO of the Secretariat to actually suggest to the National Dialogue Committee that probably this issue of delimitation of boundaries, the role should be taken away from the Electoral Commission, that we have a separate commission dealing with electoral issues and give this job for boundary limitation to someone else.
Well, it's a hot potato, but facts are facts. I'm praying that President William Ruto will bite the bullet. If it means well for this country, let him bite the bullet. I know it's a costly bullet, but let him bite it.
How costly?
It's very costly because, as you said, you see, once a region has X number of constituencies, and you tell them that I must now remove 2 or 3, that can be used politically, it can be used against you. Say, no, we told you that this guy is not honest, this guy doesn't like this particular region, and let us deal with him. And how do voters deal with you? They wait for BBI 2 to come, and they teach you a lesson. So, politicians are politicians. They never, 90% of the time, they never do what is good for the populace. They do things for their own political survival. So my prayer is that His Excellency, my very good friend, pass my regards, that for the first time, let him do the right thing. The right thing is to follow the Constitution as it is.
Do you think, do you agree with that assumption that, or with the proposal that that job should be given to a different commission? Because already the Electoral Commission, let's not call it joint IEBC, it's already...
Marajan is a good friend of mine. But you see, that is why he accepted the job. We already have too many commissions. In fact, I think we need to reduce the number of commissions. Some of them serve no purpose, they add no value. So if Marajan now is saying, add another commission, he's actually driving himself out of office. Because the question would be, is there another Kenyan who can perform both duties, who can deliver?
The Interreligious Council shares the same concern, and probably it's because of the kind of timelines we're looking at. The possibility of a referendum, which will still be up to the same commission, the fact that we still even have by-elections that are yet to be conducted. The IEBC between now and 2027 has a lot of work to do, and adding a very emotive and a resource-consuming job like delimitation of boundaries, we could actually have an effect of having voters angry at the commission for one reason or another. That concern is valid, don't you think?
Discontent to the commission does not bar them from doing their work. They will not need to take an elective office, so they will not have direct interaction with the voter. They will just manage the results of the voting process. I also do not think it's a good idea to have another commission. This economy is quite strained. Right now, we are struggling with containing the debt and managing to run an economy without serious shortfalls. So, adding an extra burden is a major issue. And even in Parliament today, for a bill to pass through, you have to prove that it's not a money bill. If it's a money bill, there must be a clear way of raising the money within the institutions created in that particular provision. Now, when it comes to work that's supposed to be done, the institution was created to do that work. Then they should be able to go ahead and do it. There's one thing I want to refute. It will not be the president to say. I think these talks, plus the outcome of the talks and the proposals that they make as a progression of the talks, will give Kenyans a possibility to ventilate. And they'll bring out the issues themselves. And these issues will be considered on merit. If we are honest as a people, who want this unit called Kenya to continue growing, then we must be able to consider everyone as an equal Kenyan, guaranteed by the Bill of Rights to have all the rights.
Yet we saw that the last boundaries review, it started off by the IIBRC, the Independent Boundaries Review Commission. It had nothing to do with the Electoral Commission, and chaired by Andrew Ligale. We saw even the report, the kind of hurdles it faced, being opposed by members of parliament. That's how emotive this situation is, such that they were not even able to implement that. And the next IEBC, the one chaired by Isaac Hassan, had to tick over that so that by 2012 some of these things could be reviewed. Are we looking at the same kind of hullabaloo this time around, especially simply around the boundaries of constituencies and wards?
Of course, we are likely to face a similar situation because we have a problem of not, learning from the past. We have that weakness. We don't, we don't take our past very, very, very seriously. So I'm hoping that, as I said, that all the players will do the job honestly, will do the job not for their political survival or their personal interests, but they are doing this job for the sake of making sure that Kenya remains as one unit and we all progress together. We don't want to leave any region behind, because they have been disadvantaged. It's only God who can explain why some people found themselves in northern Kenya and others, like Mheshimiwa, found themselves in the rich, the land of Meru. So it's only God who can explain that one. So let us not punish people for a mistake which is not theirs. But I think bottom line is biting the bullet. Let us just do what is right. Whether it has some political consequences or not, that is immaterial. And this is where now you come to appreciate those people who get into office to serve and not to serve their own interests. Those people who get into office to serve will do the right thing no matter how painful. People will remember you even decades after you've gone. They will remember you. They'll say, okay, there was so-and-so in office. He made this decision at that particular point in time. It didn't seem to be right, but the man had a vision.
Okay.
Let's avoid a situation where people will be saying, there was a man called Fred Indimuli. Let him burn whatever he is for the decisions that he made, because they were bad decisions.
Yes.
But you see, the issue of development of our people came up even during the constitutional, the review of the constitution, and there were appropriations put in place. There is the issue of equalization fund, which targets regions that have not developed as fast as others.
At the county level?
At the county level. But we've been discussing this issue even at Parliament to try and bring in the lower level, move that lower from county to even a sub-location. And I think they did disagree. I mean, they did list down the sub-locations and use the formula to try and see how many can fit in the first, second, third category. But you realize that the parameters that are used to measure, to qualify, are not very good parameters in the sense that they look at access to education. If there's a school nearby, irrespective of the nature of the school and how poor that school is, people are accessing education so you score low marks. Across
county borders, because schools cannot say we only serve this county.
You see, when we go to sub-location now, you look at the sub-location on its own merit. Now, access to, for instance, healthcare, access to water, some of those needs to be looked into. It leaves out very vulnerable areas from the list of those that are supposed to benefit from that fund. The other thing is also ensuring that this fund works. There hasn't been so much of, voting money into this particular equalization fund, realizing the projects that have been promised or proposed and, fueling these projects to move on. That has not happened. So we need to focus a lot more on such things. And I think people will be comfortable if they are taken care of, irrespective of the circumstances that surround their dwelling.
Okay. There already exists conflicts about some boundaries that were set back then. Those issues are yet to be reviewed. We are approaching the next review. We're going to have even more conflict. The other risk involved is that we might see a caucusing, regional caucusing of leaders to try and fight for the rights of what we call our people, that people in Mount Kenya might regroup. We've already seen that even within the Azimio formation, that they have Kamwene separately. We might have leaders from Nyanza and Western, each group caucusing. Do you see a risk with that as well?
Of course, why, Fred, we must ask ourselves, why do people caucus? Because there's fear that if we don't caucus, we'll be punished. And the punishment comes from those in power, those who are holding political power. So if the distribution of our national resources were fair, who would be bothered? Who would be bothered with president? Who would be bothered how many constituencies we have? Because at the end of the day, what a human being wants is service delivery, fairness. Because there's no petrol station that Mheshimiwa can show me that is selling fuel at 100 shillings, as they had promised. All people are suffering. It's the same, 111. So if we get to a space where we get into office, we get there for the purposes of just service the people, being fair, I think these issues of caucusing will be caucusing for Kenya and not caucusing for small little units. Yeah. So let's move the conversation from regional caucusing to having a national conversation. Our interests are national. It doesn't matter whether you are a Luo, you are a Kenyan, you are paying taxes. It doesn't matter whether you come from which region. We're all Kenyans, and we expect fair treatment,
Okay.
equal treatment. Okay? But of course, the risk, Fred, you know, and we live in this country, is that you get into power, and for the period that you're holding power, you know, the other communities really suffer, because all of us are paying taxes, and you find that other areas are being favored. Why? So it is us who are holding that political power. We've been given that responsibility, who can make sure that the conversation changes. And I was, I was happy that for the first time they were talking about hustlers, that, because it was about a people. They didn't say hustler from Central, hustler from Western. They talked about, but now the conversation has changed. It's no longer about the hustler. In fact, those people who are hustlers are now multi-billionaires in 1 year.
Okay. Now,
Sad.
As we move towards any election, there's always one big conversation that probably drives the agenda, either for or against. One of it was the BBI proposal, for example, just before that election. In 2007, as we were heading there, that 2005 referendum for the Constitution made a lot of difference. This time around, there's a possibility of a Constitution referendum for various reasons, but there's this, what we're discussing today, boundaries review, which rarely come together. It would appear that heading towards 2027, the conversations will be many and diverse. What kind of risk does this portend?
Well, the risk is having increased discontent in individuals and probably government. But it very much depends on how the entire conversation is managed, the entire messaging is managed. When we talk about equity, when we talk about distribution of resources, we should never forget to talk about equity in the distribution of resources. And we should never forget that we do not have abundance of resources, we have scarcity. So in the face of scarcity, there may be discontent. But if Kenyans see a fair distribution across the country, they will not be too hard on anyone.
Yeah.
Now, as we move towards the elections, of course, there are several issues that probably will need demand for referendum. And one of them is this boundaries review. I am sure it's an area that we need to look at. I am sure it is, many people will be interested in probably compressing their regions because you are serving our people. If the Kenyan, and we are saying now, we are talking about the Kenyan. If the Kenyan is clearly aware that we are doing this job an individual, that hustler, I don't think Kenyans should have.
Is the Kenyan aware? Because the issue is these conversations have the potential to create a lot of discontent, even within the Kenya Kwanza formation itself. The president has been very keen on approaching the election as one big party, monolithic party. Even the conversation about swallowing other parties into UDA. Sustaining this one big party to the election will be difficult for this president, especially with this kind of conversations in place. Boundaries review.
I think, Fred, I think that's where we get it wrong. We spend so much energy focusing on issues that are completely irrelevant. Should we not be rallying behind ideologies than focusing to have one huge political movement? What does it stand for? It can be big, yes, but what does it stand for? Is your objective just to have one huge political party, so that you can turn yourself into some form of a dictator? Okay? So right now, those are not things to focus on. They are pressing issues that this country is facing, that energy should be directed that side. As a politician, you'd want to have one party that is strong, but the question is, should we be spending our energies trying to form that huge political party. Because see, you can spend that energy, and Mheshimiwa knows because he is on the ground, that right now there is a lot of discomfort. They, even those who voted, I don't know for which side, people are just angry because they were overpromised, nothing's happening. And today, you probably call for elections. I don't know about my in-law here, but I can tell you 70% of these guys will go home. They will straight away go home because people are just angry that, these guys promised us milk and honey, but now they're serving us chili. Mm-hmm. There's too much chili sauce.
I think I own a different opinion. Let us look at the reality. What actually happens? There is no political party which can individually win an election in Kenya so far. Always towards the end of, as we drive closer to an election, we have coalitions. There must be coalitions. So the other way of interpreting, instead of having coalitions always, why don't we have one political party which we can develop and strengthen, which covers across the country?
Is the ability of this president to sustain this Kenya Kwanza formation as it is and hold it together until 2027, given the kind of conversations that you're talking about that could create discontent.
Kenya Kwanza is very stable right now, and Kenya Kwanza stability is going to increase with time because there is a lot of interest in the ideology of the Kenya Kwanza as a party, the direction that the Kenya Kwanza, the options that the Kenya Kwanza is taking, and the way the Kenya Kwanza is interpreting development.
Okay.
One thing that we need to be bearing in mind is that Kenya will not remain the way it is or that's been for the last 1 year. There is a lot of effort to reach the common man, a lot. And once these start bearing fruits in the next 2-3 years, 1-2 years, by the way, by the end of the year in office, Kenyans will start appreciating the efforts that His Excellency the President is making right now.
Okay.
Do you remember when Kibaki got into office? People called him also a taxman. There was too much of discontent at the beginning. But on the third year, fourth year, Kibaki was darling to most of the people.
Okay, because of time, I'll ask you gentlemen to give the final words.
Fred, before I even give my final comment, you see, let's not compare chalk and cheese. When Kibaki took over, he did one thing. He made sure that Kenyans started believing in Kenya. So the first thing he did was to come up with a vision for this country, a shared vision. All of us were part of that vision. And he started rolling out the vision. And if there's something that that probably I would blame Uhuru Kenyatta for not doing, he did a lot, by the way. You may want to discredit him, and that is your own opinion. But he should have reminded us that whatever he's doing is deriving from Vision 2030. That it is not nothing new. Probably he's only fast-tracking, so there's pain. William Ruto is trying to do the same thing, but he's not talking about Vision 2030. So all these things emanate from a vision that people had agreed, it's a shared vision. Now, in my closing, Fred, I'm surprised that Mheshimiwa is saying that it will take, my good friend Musalia said, okay, the pain will be there for 3 years, but who wants to be inflicted with pain for 3 years without any proper explanation? Now, finally, the Kenya government has made a decision to send our security forces. I heard Mutua talk about, a name that we should want to forget, police force. It's a police service. Please, when you see him, Alfred, tell him we move from force to service, because the service. Well, that decision has been made. I don't agree with that decision, but I wish our officers well. I wish and I pray for them that they go do what they're supposed to do, make this country proud, and come back alive. Because Haiti is not Kondele, it's Kondele times 3. And there, they don't use stones, they use bullets. So if they underestimated the capacity of Haitians, a rude shock may be awaiting them.
Okay, thank you for that. Finally, Honorable Dr. Mutunga.
I'll say that pressure on Kenyans is easing, especially the cost of food is coming down significantly. What we would like to see...
Which supermarket?
What we would like to see, let me say this. For instance, the cost of a bag of maize in North Rift today is 3,800 or less. It was 6,500. Now we have moved from 6,500 to 3,800. We would like to see this cost translate into the consumer relief. Mm-hmm. Relieving the consumer, other than supporting the middle person here. That's a mistake we make as a country. When there is cost escalation in terms of, for instance, even if it is fuel. If fuel is now at 211, and it goes down probably to 180, we don't follow to make sure the consumer benefits. We leave the middle person to benefit. Mm-hmm. And that's how we do not develop a country. Okay. We need to see these costs translated into the consumer, relief. Okay. Then when it comes to decisions made by our country, I believe there has been sufficient consultation, and I believe the role that they are going to play is not the frontline role. As we know, in most of the other areas where we can go on peacekeeping, mm-hmm. It's normally not frontline. The people, or rather the security forces from the country will take the frontline role. Okay. And then these ones will give them backup. I believe that's the kind of arrangements that they have, even if they have to go to it or any other country.
Well, thank you so much, Honorable Dr. John Mutunga, MP Tigania West, and Philip Kisia, governance expert and a former Nairobi town clerk. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your very well-considered opinions on this matter of boundaries review that many Kenyans are yet to interact with, but will come to hit us come next year in March with that deadline that is lapsing. As we come to the end of this session, let me go through this editorial commentary. Now, the acceptance of the joint bid by Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda to host the Africa Cup of Nations tournament in 2027 is undoubtedly a cause for celebration among sports fans in Kenya. It represents a significant opportunity to showcase Kenya's commitment to football and sports on the continental stage. However, it also raises legitimate questions and concerns given the historical challenges faced by Kenyan football for many years. Now, the beautiful game has struggled to grow and reach its full potential on Kenyan soil due to corruption, favoritism, and mismanagement. Lack of tangible government support has only added to the skepticism surrounding the sports development. Promised state-of-the-art stadia that were to be built over a decade ago have yet to materialize. Our skepticism is further fueled by past instances. In 1996 and 2018, for example, where Kenya won bids to host tournaments but failed to provide the necessary infrastructure, resulting in these opportunities slipping away. The key question now is, what will be different this time around? Can Kenya, along with its partners Tanzania and Uganda, ensure that the necessary infrastructure and preparations are in place to host a successful tournament come 2027? Now, Kenya cannot rely solely on the successes of its neighbors to make its bid viable. Instead, it should use this opportunity to chart its own path to football excellence. This collaboration with Tanzania and Uganda can help share the